Now, the tale begins with Frances, barely 17, being married off to the 27-year-old, very handsome ship's master, Captain Charles William Barkley, Esquire, in a marriage service performed by her own father. Uh, was any of this normal for the time?
Mostly wives stayed ashore. Very few of them went with their husbands. Uh, it was too dangerous for them. They weren't acclimated. Well, she wasn't attuned to the sea either. But there were a couple of things in Frances's that caused Frances to go. I think she was just adventurous to start with. She was deeply in love with her husband, and she didn't want to just quickly get. I mean, they had a courtship of 5 weeks, and 39 days after that, they set sail for a voyage around the world into places that Europeans didn't know about at all. So I think she also, they couldn't afford to stay at home. He had to help support this trip. So she really didn't have any option, but she really wanted to go.
Now, among her exploits was being the first European woman to visit what would become Canada's west coast. You mentioned how rare it was for a woman to be on a sailing ship at this time, and it also wasn't very easy to be a woman on a ship full of men either, some wanting to take advantage.
There was the first officer who, as soon as she was introduced to him, she had some feelings that this was not going to be, she had to be very careful. She didn't tell her husband because she didn't want to worry him. He had to keep his mind on running the ship. But he got sick as they were coming out of the Bay of Biscay. They hit some bad weather, and he took a chill and he got quite sick. So that's when the first officer made some very unscrupulous moves toward her. She never did tell her husband, but she really was very cautious of him from then on, and was shocked that an officer could do that.
Now, besides that, Frances endured many hardships as the wife of a sea captain. And at the end of their time together, they were not wealthy at all. In fact, they got by on the generosity of relatives like the captain's brother. Was this a common fate for folks who made their living at sea?
It could be, but his background was he was a captain with the British East India Company. And for some reason, I really don't understand, he chose to leave that and fly the Austrian flag. And that created difficulties for him because they could come to the West Coast and trade. They could trade in China, but wherever and then they could sell their goods, but then they would have to leave in ballast, which meant they had to leave empty-handed. They couldn't pick up other trade goods to take someplace else. And the East India Company was very powerful at that time. So I think in order to do what he did, he had to support a lot of the trips partially himself and get backers. And it just wasn't fruitful for them.
Now, the Barkleys left their mark with a number of place names that still survive today, including the Barkley Sound and Francis Island, among others. They also recognized the Strait of Juan de Fuca as well, which some said didn't exist. What do you think Francis Barkley's legacy is?
I it shows you how to be bold. It shows you to be strong. It shows you to be flexible. They were very happy to meet other people. They were very good in their trading. I think it's a tremendous love story. And also it gives us an insight into the whole maritime trading at that particular time period, which was pretty unscrupulous and pretty cutthroat.
Now, you mentioned your daughter off the top and not having a lot of women role models to read about as a child. So having said all that, what do you hope then that the reader takes away from this story?
I really hope that we can get to the stage where we acknowledge that women have been on the forefront of our history all along. They've helped mold societies. They've been adventurous. When I first started taking this tack to my writing, I thought, they may be the odd woman. And yes, they are. That's who writers pick to write about. But it was more common than we realized. I realized she was the first woman to openly sail around the world. But it was still more common than we think about. We just have never written women into our history.
The name of the book is Frances Barkley, 18th-century Seafarer. It's part of the Amazing Stories series from Heritage House Publishing. My thanks to author and historian Cathy Converse.
Thank you. It was nice to be here.